Chapter 14. At first, the others thought that Edward was a great good joke. "A rabbit," they would laugh. "Let's chop him up and put him in the stew." Or when Bull sat with Edward carefully balanced on his knee, one of them would call out, "Got yourself a little dolly, Bull?" Edward, of course, felt a strange surge of anger at being referred to as a dolly, but Bull never got angry. He simply sat with Edward on his knee and said nothing. Soon the men became accustomed to Edward, and word of his existence spread. So it was when Bull and Lucy stepped up to a campfire in another town, another state, another place entirely, the men knew Edward and were glad to see him. "Malone!" they all shouted in unison, and Edward felt a warm rush of pleasure at being recognized and being known. Whatever it was they had begun in Nellie's kitchen, Edward's new and strange ability to sit very still and concentrate the whole of his being on the stories of another became invaluable around the campfire. "Look at Malone," said a man named Jack one evening. "He's listening to every dang word." "Certainly," said Bull. "Of course he is." And later that night, Jack came and sat next to Bull and asked if he could borrow the rabbit. Bull handed Edward over, and Jack sat with Edward upon his knee, and he whispered into Edward's ear. "Helen," Jack said, "and Jack Jr. and Taffy. She's the baby. Those are my kids' names. They're all in North Carolina. You've ever been to North Carolina? It's a pretty state. That's where they are. Helen, Jack Jr., and Taffy. You remember their names for me, okay, Malone?" And after this, wherever Bull and Lucy and Edward went, some tramp would take Edward aside and whisper the names of his children in Edward's ear. Betty, Ted, Nancy, William, Jimmy, Eileen, Skipper, Faith. Edward knew what it was like to say over and over the names of those you had left behind. He knew what it was like to miss someone, and so he listened, and in his listening his heart opened wide, and then wider still. The rabbit stayed lost with Lucy and Bull for a long time. Almost 7 years passed, and in that time Edward became an excellent tramp. Happy to be on the road, restless when he was still. The sound of the wheels on the train tracks became a music that soothed him. He could have ridden the rails forever. But one night in a railroad yard in Memphis, as Bull and Lucy slept in an empty freight car and Edward kept watch, trouble arrived. A man entered the freight car and shone a flashlight in Bull's face and then kicked him awake. "Yo, bum, you dirty bum. I'm sick of you guys sleeping everywhere. This ain't no motel." Bull sat up slowly, and Lucy started to bark. "Be quiet," said the man, and he delivered a swift kick to Lucy's side that made her yelp in surprise. All his life, Edward had known what he was, a rabbit made of china, a rabbit with bendable arms and legs and ears. He was bendable, though only if he was in the hands of another. He could not move himself, and he had never regretted this more deeply than he did that night when he and Bull and Lucy were discovered in the empty rail car. Edward wanted to be able to defend Lucy, but he could do nothing. He could only lie there and wait. "Say something," the man said to Bull. Bull put his hands up in the air and he said, "We're lost." "Lost, huh? You bet you're lost." And then the man said, "What's this?" And he shone the light on Edward. "That's Malone," said Bull. "What the?" said the man, and he poked Edward with the toe of his boot. "Things are out of control. Things are out of hand. Not on my watch, sir. No, not when I'm in charge." And the train suddenly lurched into motion. "No, sir." And he looked down at Edward. "No free rides for rabbits." And he turned and flung open the door of the rail car, and then he turned back with one swift kick. He sent Edward sailing out into the darkness. The rabbit flew through the late spring air, and far from behind him he heard Lucy's anguished howl. "Oh!" she cried. Edward landed with the most alarming thump, and then he tumbled and tumbled and tumbled down a long, dirty hill. When he finally stopped moving, he was on his back, staring up at the night sky. The world was silent. He could not hear Lucy. He could not hear the train. Edward looked up at the stairs. He started to say the names of the constellations, but then he stopped. Bull, his heart said. Lucy. How many times, he wondered, would he have to leave without getting a chance to say goodbye? A lone cricket started up a song, and Edward listened. Something deep inside him ached, and he wished that he could cry.